Hello, 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 hello.
Welcome everyone to Kansas City's Global Community Radio Station. You're tuned in to Purpose Passion Power with Jessica Lynn, and I am so excited to have these powerhouses that are going to be in the house with me today. I am sitting at the table, everyone, with the one and only Mrs. Barbara Ann Washington, who is the state representative for District 23. She's also running for Missouri State Senate.
Yes.
And I am excited to be here. Listen, it's been a minute since I've been in the studio. We had Carolyn Hammond take over for me 2 weeks ago as my husband and I celebrated our anniversary, and she was phenomenal. I'm all about uplifting and empowering women, and I have a mission to, Barbara, bring our black and white sisters and brown sisters together to make a change. And so this is so timely right now. We're going to be talking about voting for change. And Alicia Kennedy will be joining us, who is the candidate for lieutenant governor.
Correct.
We are talking about not city or local
so
positions.
This time we are
state.
voting on both. We're voting on primarily state and some national elections. So this is the primary. So each voter will pick a ballot, whether you want to pick Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, the Green Party, or the Constitution Party, which are the 5 parties that we recognize in Missouri. So I am running at, so you may have multiple candidates on your ballot, but you will only vote for one party. And then when Wednesday morning wakes up, those winners will move on to the November election, where then you will choose from whoever the winners were on Tuesday.
And I'm so excited that you're going to be moving forward. I am a visionary, and I am a speak it person. Jessica Lynn Speaks Life is another whole nother topic, but I'm speaking life today.
And we appreciate it. We need that.
Yes.
All the prayers, whomever you pray to, whoever you worship, whether you are Muslim, whether you are Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, we need all the great spirits that you have to move forward in this election. This has been a seat that has been held by someone in our community for 8, 16, 24, over 30 years.
Wow.
And we need someone who speaks for us, who is of us, and who is for us. And from us. And I am that person. I've been a strong voice for Kansas Cityans and Jackson County as a whole, and Jefferson City. And I'm the right person to continue to move on and be the strong voice, because I am effective, experienced, and engaged in the community. You really can't get any better than me.
And so I just really want to repeat that, because I literally wrote that down. Effective, engaged, and experienced.
Yes, ma'am.
And those are the 3 E's that we need. Not only that, you're a powerful woman, and that's what I'm so excited about. It took how many years for us to even have the right to vote as a people, and then women to have the right to vote.
Correct.
And now I sit before you, childhood friend, who has basically just changed the world.
I wouldn't say change the world.
Yes, ma'am.
I
know she's being modest and humble.
I think it's important that that God says that you don't have a testimony if you haven't been through a test, and you don't have a message unless you've been through some mess. And so I am blessed and humbled to be able to have a village in my life, including my sister, who flew in today, last night, to help me from California. My brother, who is cheering for me as much as possible with his money. Thank you. You can send more if you're watching. And as much social media he can, from Qatar. My sister sent her son here a couple of weeks ago. I have cousins that came in, the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the women of Links Incorporated, Jackson County, Missouri chapter, all my lawyer friends. So it's great to have a village that you've been with, but that is because I truly believe that to whom much is given, much is required. And I have done that through the service in my community, and to everyone that I can be of service to. And all I'm asking is, don't vote for me as a politician on Tuesday. Vote for me because I am a servant of my community, and I want to continue to serve. You talked about women and voting, and I was watching MSNBC today, and I think there are 400 maybe women
Mm-hmm.
of color that are running for Congress.
Wow.
This is a record-breaking year. Even if none of them win, we have come a long way. In 100 years since women first got the right to vote, it has now blossomed into women being the voice of all the people.
Yes.
On MSNBC today, I think there were 6 African American candidates for Congress, and each of them said they do not represent, they are not running in African American districts. And so that means that for some of them are already the Democrat nominee, which is a testament to who we are as women, to be able to cross boundaries and barriers regardless of race, creed, color, or social economic status. So going to your mission, we already are doing that. We just need to let everybody know.
Yes.
And as Black women, we have the power to make a difference.
Yes.
If you don't believe us, just look to the Alabama election a couple of years ago to Senator Doug Jones. And if he ain't done them right, he probably won't be going back. So we are the voice. We are the biggest number of single mothers, and we know how to manage our households. We know how to manage a budget. We do logistics when we take our kids to and from and take their other kids with them. We know how to retain our earnings so we can have money for the next month. And by putting all those business sense together that we don't even know we have, that shows that we are also the right ones to be elected and move forward in not only this election cycle, but when we come back to our municipal elections, when we come back in November and beyond.
Awesome. You are just, see, this is what I'm talking about. And I do want to give a shout out to her sister. Gretchen is in the studio with us today. She is beautiful and poised, and wow, every time I see her, she's just amazing. But it speaks of the stock that you come from. And I want to talk a little bit about you and the story that was printed in the Star. I think it was last week. Yes, you wrote about, how your mother raised you, and your mother was basically just the matriarch of your family. Didn't have a college degree, but excelled so well. So talk to
the Star. I think asked 28 folks to write an essay about your experience with prejudice or discriminatory actions. And so in mine, I had a incident in. I was probably in my 30s. Yeah, I was in my late 30s, working at Banana Republic, and a young man, and he didn't know any better. He just made a comment that the world was better for me as a Black woman because I got to work with him as a white man when, unbeknownst to him, Black folks had been working with white folks since we got here in 1619. But it bothered me because he meant it that just to be next to him because he's white made my life better. And I did share with him that I'm a person, I believe in a four-year education. I also believe in trade school. I believe that to be better in anything, you can always be a life learner. And back then I probably was a little sensitive about my education. And so I was offended that you, who I don't even know where you went to college, it wasn't something that rang out for me, but to think that my life is better as a person with an undergraduate degree from the best journalism school in the world, a law degree, a license to practice law, and an MBA was enhanced by being next to you at Banana Republic. Are you kidding me? And so it was a testament to my mom that I didn't go off back then, but I had to educate him because my mother at the time was probably 72, 71. And I shared with him that she came from a class in 1948 before Brown versus Board of Education, where her whole class was Black and they all graduated from high school. That my mother taught us to be proud Black people.
Yes.
And I have a mother, God bless her soul, and a grandfather and a whole side of my family, as you know, because you've been around us forever, that has mixed race. And my grandfather is a descendant of a master, of a slave master. His grandfather, whom he knew, was a slave master. His grandmother, his own mother was a Native American. But yet we have a whole side of our family who lived in East St. Louis. And sometime when you go there, you have to wonder, am I really kin to that person? because they don't look like me. But I'm proud of the Ward family because no matter how we look, we were always taught, and I'm looking at my sister because she knows this, that we should be just as proud of the black blood that runs through our veins as the white blood that runs through our veins. And my mother didn't go to college. If you're United Methodist and you know my mother, you know why. But because she didn't get along with the bishop at the time. But she was very smart and learned how to be a computer programmer. In fact, if she was alive today, if you listen to the news, our people's unemployment checks are behind because people don't know COBOL computer programming. And that's what my mother did. And so she was a pioneer who in the 50s, a little black girl from mid-Missouri, Blackburn and Slater and Glasgow and Saline County, learned how to program computers and ended up being the first black woman that AT&T hired, at least in her region that she knew of, which was about 10 states. So what we love about her is she didn't let us slack. And anybody who came in her way, you knew that. If you asked her to help you get a job at AT&T, she'd first say, don't dream to be on that phone. Dream to have a gift and a talent that if AT&T lays you off, you can take it somewhere else. And so we all in my neighborhood appreciated that. She was hard on us. And she did this with 5 of us as a single mother.
And you were the youngest.
I'm the baby, as my brother likes to tell me, and my sister like to tell me. They are much older than me. Much older than me.
She's rubbing that really good in.
But she did not let not having our dads in the house let us slack. You were not allowed to not excel. She used to say, what was that, dream on a jet helicopter, which is not something that actually existed. Either you're going to be in a jet or a helicopter, but her reasoning was to dream big and understand you can be anything, that it doesn't matter that you're at 64128 2713 Cleveland, that this neighborhood has changed tremendously since she bought in 1952, 53. Yeah, 53. She stayed there because she wanted to be a force and wanted to be an example that the kids that couldn't afford to move or go to private school or go to college, that you could see that with hard work, determination, and some hope, you can be anything you want to be. And the 5 of us may not be everything we want to be, but we are all living the dream that my mother would be happy to see us live.
And I'm just so glad you shared that story because that's what it's all about. It's in your DNA. And I say that about myself. Our stories are very similar with our
your mama may be on me too. So.
With our grandfathers and being my great grandfather was white. Same story. Yeah. A great grandfather, I should say.
Who's ours? I think it's our actual our great grandfather was the slave. And so he was the product. My grandfather is the first free person born in our family. So that's how old these folks are. He was probably too old to have my mom, but his dad was the slave. And my great grandfather, William Oliver Henry Ward, was a slave whose father was the master and his mother was a slave. So it's something that we know. But there were critical things said about our great grandfather Josh, our great grandfather the master. But Josh respected his kids. He gave to his kids. Of course, we still poor because they didn't go get it. But we were never taught that to think because your skin is lighter and your hair is curly that makes you better than anybody. Because it doesn't.
No.
In fact, my mother, whose hair, as you know, was very fine, used to say that this ain't good hair. You know, you can't put no pressing comb through this hair. I can't get no styles in my hair. I can't get a perm in my hair. That ain't good hair. That's bad hair. But it was a way for her to let everybody know it doesn't matter how you look. It doesn't matter that you can't let society judge you by your physical appearance, and that you can't think that I got to go here and be by somebody that doesn't look like me because their ice is colder. Doesn't mean I don't love everybody.
Yes.
It just means I love myself the most.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad that you've gone from, your heritage has gone from slavery to state representative.
Yes.
To soon to be Senate. Amen,
that's
everybody.
The prayer. That is
Amen,
the prayer.
everybody.
That's the prayer.
Amen, everybody. And so we are believing that we have, if you're just now tuning in, you're tuned in to Kansas City's global community radio station, KUAW. Purpose, Passion, and Power with Jessica Lynn. I am sitting at the table with two powerhouses that I'm so proud to call my sisters and friends, and they have overcome so many obstacles. We're all from the East Side, so shout
All
out
from
to
the
the
East
East Side.
Side.
We're all
Shout
from the
out to
East
East
Side.
Bears, because you
East
know, even
Bears.
though I only went there for 2 months, I'm gonna always be an East Bear, because that's
Once
where I
an
grew
East
up.
Bear, always an East Bear,
And
and
shout
some
out to the Northeast Vikings.
Northeast Vikings.
I don't know if we like that.
You know, they were our rival, but
Uh-huh.
but it's okay. We're all grown and doing the thing now, so we're just lifting each other up. We have Lieutenant Governor candidate Alicia Kennedy, former councilwoman, former prosecuting attorney, powerhouse, inspiration to me and so many others in the House. And Barbara had said earlier before you got here, whether these 400 women that are running, that are of color, that are running right now for office, whether they win or not, you are all number one in my book, because we have come so far from, we already said it earlier, slavery to where we are now, to having a voice for change.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about a voice for change. And so I'm going to turn it over to Miss Alicia Kennedy. I want to hear a little bit about you coming up with a single mother. Barbara was raised with a single mother as well, on the East Side, Northeast graduate. What's in it for everybody if they vote for you, or when they vote for you?
So let's start from the beginning. So I grew up on the east side of Kansas City, like the story that's been told before me as well. My mom worked really hard. She was a teen parent. You know, she had her first child, I want to say when she was maybe 15. And so the neighbor's kid, they was, you know, amen. And so, but she went on anyway and graduated early from high school. My mom was very smart, extremely intelligent. But in our family, there's a lot of influence from our grandparents, very much so, matriarchal form of family structure. And so I grew up with my great grandmother. My maternal grandmother passed away when I was probably a toddler. And so I grew up with my great grandmother and a lot of extended family. Very rich, loving family environment, very supportive environment. My mom worked, went to school, worked 2 jobs, whatever it took to raise her 3 kids. And oftentimes I had a cousin or 2 that lived with us as well. So not only did she raise her own, she also imparted to the cousins as well. And, you know, my mom is a little thing, and she just had a birthday this week. So thank you, everybody that wished her happy birthday. She was so happy. But I will tell you, she was, you know, she's tiny but powerful, and did not allow me to slack in any form or fashion. I'm my mom's youngest child. I'm her only daughter. And she set the bar really high for me, because obviously with her experiences and things she had to overcome being a young mother, there were a lot of opportunities she did not get to pursue. So it was important for me to go to college after I graduated high school. But I started working full time my junior year of high school. My mom worked. She did her best to provide for us, but because she didn't have a college education, she didn't earn a lot of money. So we all chipped in to help. And so I started working my junior year of high school, contributing, giving back to the family. I moved out on my own my senior year of high school. So at 17, I was on my own, independent living as a student. And then just went on from there, but was taught a lot of responsibility. But I had accountability because there was a strong village of people around me, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. So that has been impactful. The Kennedy family is very broad and wide. The Kennedys, Moores, and Byers, a lot of us, a lot of cousins around town. But I always had a sense of empowerment, do better, have more, go farther. Don't be limited to what you see. Opportunity is out there. You have to be willing to work hard to accomplish it. And so I've been able to do those things. As far as, my career path trajectory, never in a million years would I have thought I would be in politics. In hindsight, I was always in student council. So I guess I should not be surprised, but I did not see myself as a political figure, because when I saw politicians growing up, they were mostly men. The first woman political figure I remember is Councilwoman Carol Coe, who is a mentor to me today. We spent a lot of time on the phone in the recent weeks, her encouraging me, as particularly since John Lewis passed away, and her being intentional about passing the baton, her learned experiences and pouring into me, given I have the opportunity to win this city as lieutenant governor, to be the first Black person elected statewide in the state of Missouri. So what's in it for anybody else if I'm successful in this election cycle? First, we got to get through the primary. So I need everybody to show up on Tuesday, August the 4th, because I do have a primary. There's another gentleman running as a Democratic candidate out of St. Louis. Hasn't really demonstrated much viability, but his name is on the ballot, so we need to make sure I get the most votes. So please tell your friends and family to show up to support me in the primary. And then we'll work really hard this fall for the next 90 days for the general election in November. The incumbent that's in the seat now was not elected, has never been elected statewide, was appointed by his good friend who is now the governor. And so we will have a very fierce fall where we will distinguish ourselves to the voters across the state of Missouri. But what's in it for you? What's in it for you is having someone that's culturally competent to lead at the state level. You know, we're dealing with a lot of issues in the state of Missouri where we are asking for equity, we're asking for fairness, we want opportunities as far as contracts in business. We're saying in education, we got a governor who says send your kids to school, they're gonna get sick, but they'll get over it without any regard for what happens when they get home and the extended families that may be caring for those children. Like I said, I had a strong connection with my grandparents. I was with them every day when I was growing up. So that's not safe. And then the reckless disregard for children. We talk about the budget's been cut to education, $130 million. We talk about the 200 positions that have been cut from the children's division. Whose kids are in the family division? Black and brown children or poor white children. They need an advocate. And when we're cutting those positions, over 200 positions, that means those children are going to have one less advocate. Those caseloads are going to be overburdened. And so those are the things that are at stake as far as what this next election entails, in addition to so many things that legislative items and priorities that will come before us as well. But life and death is at stake. We're talking about criminal justice issues. The governor wants to start start charging kids as adults again, and that's something that Representative Washington has fought diligently against. So we have to have effective leadership, and I can go on, but what I can tell you what benefit you'll get by having either one of us in office, with her in Senate or as me, Lieutenant Governor, presiding over the Senate, you will have effective advocates that are going to speak the will and intent of the voters in Kansas City and people of color around the state that is going to be heard in these hearings going forward after this election is over.
Wow.
So just kind of adding on to, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Adding on to what Alicia said, especially with respect to what we're going to be dealing with next week in the special session. For clarity, it is already the law that a 12-year-old can be tried as an adult with, because any prosecutor can file a petition and have a hearing before a judge. And if the judge so decides, that 12-year-old will be tried as an adult. That has not always been the law. When I got in trouble, that was not the law. Had that been the law, I may not be here today. I think you had to be 13 and a half then, and I was 13 and 5 months, and that was just God stepping in because he knew something else was down on my path. But the big challenge is that in 2018, we voted in Missouri that no longer would we charge 17-year-olds automatically as adults. I don't care what anybody says. A little boy or a little girl is not inherently bad, even if they're in a gang, because there's a whole lot of socioeconomic background to that to figure out why did he go to a gang. No 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old wakes up and says, you know what, I want to get in the Crips. I want to get beat up so I can get in there, and I want to hold a gun and go commit crimes. Nobody does that. So there is something that got them there, and I've had to share with my colleagues in Jefferson City, yes, we need to control our horrible violence here in Kansas City and throughout the state, especially with gun violence. And we always need to make sure that we are aware of the victims and protecting the victims. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that a 12-year-old who may, I'll give you a real live example. Someone I was in trouble with. I wasn't in trouble with her. She was there when I had to go to juvie. Killed her mama's boyfriend. May not have done that out of malice. She may have done that because she had been molested over and over and over. And when social services came, her mama had a clean house and said it didn't happen, and everything went away. She had to tell her uncle she doesn't even know if she killed him. He was shot and stabbed, so we don't know what did it. But my point is that had it not been for the juvenile system the way it existed then and now, she would have gone to an adult prison. And what we get back when we send babies to prison, we don't get back grown folks that are going to be responsible. We get back children that are still children in the mind and the soul, and just adults by age, and they have been molested, they have been abused physically, emotionally, verbally, and we bring back to our community menaces to society. We have a cousin who went away as a 17-year-old and came back. I love him to death, but had he not gone away at 17 and had to be with grown folks, he would be a different person today. He's a great, wonderful person, and he contributes to society. But I know how smart he was and what he could have been had that same 17-year-old been provided an opportunity to be in a juvenile justice system, which is geared towards treatment and reunification with the family, as opposed to the adult system that we are paying a lot of money for, that is geared for punishment and doesn't give people that look like us, especially black men, a lot of chances when they come back home. So we have to stop that law. It is the law that in January of next year, we are supposed to stop charging our babies at 17 as adults. And I don't want our governor and our Senate and House to change that next week. That is what's on the table. I don't think 12-year-olds should even be considered. I have filed a bill for 3 years that is 16, but I'm willing to compromise at 14 before you can even go before a judge and ask. But with Alicia, we need someone that is culturally competent, that understands not just people that look like us, but understand that our criminal justice system is cruel to poor white folks too. If you don't have any money, or a friend in the White House that lives at 1600 Black Lives Matter Drive, to get you out, to get a prosecutor to take away a judgment of the people against you. If you don't have money, whether you black, white, green, purple, yellow, whatever, you are going to suffer tremendously by being incarcerated in our system. We have a wonderful, I don't want to say wonderful, we have a woman over our Department of Corrections in Missouri who is forward thinking on a lot of things. She's not perfect, but she closed down one of the worst prisons we have in Missouri. And now you want to bring this law back and make her open 2 more prisons and cost us money, yet you don't want to expand Medicaid? Something ain't right there.
Well, you just opened up the door for that, because that was the next question about yes on 2. I'm gonna let you talk about that first, Alicia, then we'll come back to you, Barbara.
So I would say that people who don't understand what on 2 is, Amendment 2 is a constitutional amendment for us to be able to expand Medicaid in the state of Missouri, which would allow coverage for people who otherwise don't qualify for Medicaid. So there are people who are in the insurance gap. So that'd be individuals between 19 and I think Medicaid is 58, 56, somewhere in your mid 50s, that you're not eligible for those benefits now, but you may not be able to afford insurance in the private market, even under the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. So what the expanding Medicaid does is it provides accessibility to affordable care that is subsidized to those individuals. Now, who does that matter to? So we're talking about working poor folks at this point, because at 18 and under, you're a child, you're under somebody else's watch. If you're 57 and older, you're retirement age. But these are people who are working poor, meaning they're self-employed, they're underemployed, maybe they're working in food service industry and they don't offer them benefits, or they can't afford the benefits that are being offered, whatever the situation may be, because you have people now who are already deciding between paying rent or buying groceries, or paying rent and buying medication. And so what this does is it relieves the burden from those individuals who need access to quality care. Now, if COVID-19 didn't show us anything else, it highlighted the disparities in health outcomes, because who are people who are most susceptible to getting COVID-19 or dying from COVID-19? People of color who have a high concentration of these chronic diseases, asthma, diabetes, heart disease, all these things that could be preventative if people were getting early treatment and were able to access a healthy diet. But because of socioeconomic conditions, meaning poor or living in environments where they don't have access to care, rural communities, i.e., it's not just Black and brown people, rural communities are seeing some of the same challenges that we need to find ways to be able to provide more resources to them, because the state of Missouri, and that's healthcare, but then also talk about public health. Missouri spends the least amount of money on public health per person. I want to say we rank number 47 or 48 in all states. That's unacceptable. No wonder why we're a hot spot for COVID spread. So what Medicaid expansion does is it allows us to be able to provide more coverage to people. The net benefit to individuals, to the state of Missouri, the net economic benefit is expected to be about $1 billion a year. So what does that mean for us? That means more opportunities for rural communities to be able to have hospitals and access to care. People in the Boot Hill are driving an hour, 2 hours to get to Cape Girardeau for women's health care, women's wellness checks. That's unacceptable. And so, I mean, I can go on and on about all the reasons why. We talk about violent crime. I'll tie that to Yes on Two. When we have people, we see the homicide number is about 100. The aggravated assault number is probably more than 300, meaning people who were shot and didn't die, because we have good emergency response. If our EMTs and our safety net hospitals like Truman aren't adequately staffed, don't have the necessary funding to provide for indigent care, many of the young men and women who were shot or children may not, I mean, that's life or death, literally. The response times, life or death. And so even after they're stabilized, they go home, but there's aftercare that's needed. And if they're uninsured, that's going to be a problem for them because they have families or they become a burden on their family. And so all these things tie in together. It's not somebody else's problem. This is a community problem, and we need the community to show up to vote Yes on Two. And if you want more information, if you're facts and figures like me, go to yesonto.org, yesonto.org, and find out all the details about this initiative and how it benefits the whole state of Missouri.
Thank you. Wow.
I'm just going to echo what she said. She mentioned the rural areas. You know, in the last 10 years, I think the state of Missouri has had to close down 14 rural hospitals. So the other thing about why we need to do this, so don't believe the hype. This does not mean that people are going to stop working to go get Medicaid, because what Yes on Two does is it increases the number of how much you can earn to get Medicaid. So I'm not going to quit my job and go to zero, because I can do that now. This means that I can continue to work and make up to 138% of the poverty level and still be able to qualify for Medicaid. It also doesn't mean that everybody on Medicaid doesn't get Medicaid totally free. Medicaid is a form of insurance. So some working people do have copays and other things that they pay. But one thing about that Boot Hill area, which Miss Alicia knows that's my hot spot. First thing we say do is go to the Boot Hill, because if you ain't never been to Mississippi, it's in the Boot Hill. And I love my folks in the Boot Hill, don't get me wrong, but for a whole lot of them, they taking whatever little money they got, and they're not even leaving it in Missouri, because it's faster for me to go down to Memphis and maybe go over to Kentucky and maybe go to Southern Illinois, because they have some expansion there, and they also have some better public health than I'm having in my own community. So we have where our family is from, a lot of them still live. We have family in Marshall. They're blessed to have a hospital. But in Blacksburg, Missouri, where our grandmother's from, and my grandmother's youngest cousin is still alive, she's in her 90s, there is no hospital. And she has to go 20-some-odd miles to get to a hospital. That means an ambulance has to come and get her, then go back. One of my colleagues got mad because I said it's going to take about 45 minutes. Oh, no, it doesn't take that long. That's because you counted one way. See, because the ambulance got to come from Marshall to Blacksburg, then take her back. Or to go to a urgent care in Higginsville. So there are challenges that are not just for African American people. Our public health is terrible. Sometimes people say Missouri ought to thank Mississippi, because we will never be dead last. But we are always in the bottom 5, and we've got to stop that. And yes, on Amendment 2 will not only give a minimum of 220,000 Missourians the opportunity to have adequate health care, it will help with mental health. And it will mean that those people, it will actually mean they'll keep their jobs, and they'll have more taxes in our state. It'll bring 16,000 more jobs that we know for sure, not to count all the ancillary jobs and benefits that it will have. So I urge everybody to vote yes on Amendment 2, and to do your research as you want to. But remember that you're already paying taxes. So we're going to uplift a whole group, almost 250,000. Think about it. Half of Kansas City will be uplifted and not have to worry about, can I go to the doctor? Because if I go to the doctor, that's cheaper than me continuing to show up at Truman and hurt Truman more because they don't have the resources. So we need to look at the totality of that, and why yes on Amendment 2 is the right thing to do. If Oklahoma can do it, I'm a Mizzou Tiger, so I ain't never liked the Sooners, but we can't let them beat us on something as important to our people as taking care of our people.
That's right. Wow. Well, you have it. Yes, on 2, you have been given phenomenal insight from Lieutenant Governor candidate Alicia Kennedy and Missouri Senate candidate Barbara Ann Washington. This is a mouthful, y'all, so bear with me. But I want to talk a little bit also about police reform and get your feedback and talk to the people about that, because that is, as you know, where we are with the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of people have joined on with the Black Lives Matter movement in verbiage, right?
That's correct.
Right. I want to see change, and we want to talk about change on this show. So let's talk about that. I'll go to you, Alicia.
So police reform, I mean, that's a ongoing conversation. I'll speak from my perspective as a Black woman growing up in what is labeled as the murder factory, 64130 zip code. So many people I grew up with went to prison. So many people have died as a result of community violence, and there were people from within the community that committed those crimes. And we can talk about the root causes of those, and I will a little later. But what relationship does the community have in addressing those challenges? I think it's important that we really reevaluate the role of policing in our communities. Police play a very important role. They are, peacekeepers. They are public servants. They're paid to protect and to serve. And I think somewhere along the way, the relationship has morphed into a us versus them. Thus, the Blue Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter. And I think that depending on which camp you're in, you feel very strongly about one or the other. I would tell you, as a policymaker, I view them that they're not mutually exclusive. The Blue Lives are paid to protect and serve. And I think they need to be reminded sometimes of what their role is on what protection looks like in communities of color. And what a position of service looks like in communities of color. There are a number of police officers who do a phenomenal job, and I've had the privilege of working with many of them as an assistant prosecutor in Jackson County. Because when a victim is shot, they're looking for the detective to do their due diligence to investigate the crime, to follow up. They're looking for them to show up in court in the trial to be able to help them get justice from the person who their accuser when they confront their accuser. So at that point, the law enforcement officer is a partner with the community, right? But when they are looking to enforce, quote unquote, and that's where we really get into this issue when we talk about enforcement. And that's where we have to look at where the reform comes into play, because we saw with George Floyd an example of excessive force, or what was apparent to most people as excessive force. And you can argue whether or not it was or not, but most Americans feel like that was excessive, including police officers feel like that was excessive for him to have that knee in his neck for almost 9 minutes when he was already subdued. But when these instances occur, where is the accountability? When it's clearly demonstrated there's an abuse of power by a public official, where is the accountability? Because I can tell you, as if Representative, soon to be Senator Washington, abuses her power and her position that she's elected to, there's going to be some accountability. They're called federal indictments. If I abuse my power, my position, same thing. But when law enforcement officers do it, the standard is not really clear. It's very arbitrary and capricious on when their accountability comes into play. Now, most families don't get justice unless it's in civil court. But there's usually, like in Breonna, is it Breonna Taylor, her name? say her name. We're still waiting for officers to be arrested. Why? Because the laws are not set up as such that swift justice comes to victims under those circumstances. They barged in her house. The gentleman that was with her used his firearm to protect the house. That's lawful. And they shot back and killed the homeowner. But there's been no justice or no accountability to police officers. Now, that's a very dicey set of circumstances. I'm not making a judgment call. I'm just saying, when are we going to have a clear set of rules on what's fair play and what's not, so the officers are very clear on the rules of engagement across the board. I think it's important that relationship remains intact, but there has to be another level of accountability. As even when we talk about it here in Kansas City, people are saying, get rid of KC Police Chief Rick Smith. And you can get rid of him, but that doesn't solve the problem as it relates to community police relationships. Because the Black Lives Matter people are not saying get rid of Chief Smith. They're saying we want reform across the board.
Yes.
They're saying we want justice for Cameron. They're saying they want justice for all the young men and women that have been murdered in Kansas City, where there has not been any criminal charges presented. And the Jackson County prosecutor just brought charges in this past year, in the last 6 months, for the first time, against a case such as that. And so people are saying, okay, how are we going to change these rules? And the question is, what do we get locally? What are going to be the federal reforms that are going to take place to create some equity in these situations? But what is the process going to look like? How many more riots, how many more protests, how many lives are going to be lost until we get to something that's a reasonable outcome? And that's where we have to focus on as policymakers.
So, Alicia hit on my favorite term, and that is community policing. And then the second one is to protect and to serve. And you can't serve me if you refuse to know me. I will go back to Jefferson City next week, and there will be a lot of things that are going to happen. There will be a question about where police should live. I don't necessarily have the most popular view. I don't have the view that most police officers have. But I have the voice of my constituents who are very comfortable and would like for their police officers to live in their city. That the older people who remember knowing Officer Friendly. See, that wasn't just something that we made up. We knew Officer Friendly. We knew Officer Cooper. In our family, we knew Officer Captain Major Mitchell. So when we know them, they know us.
Yeah.
And there is a different level of respect both ways, so that me as a 52-year-old attorney, business owner, mentor, state representative, am not afraid when I see lights.
Yes.
I shouldn't be afraid. And if I'm afraid and I know I haven't done anything, I can't imagine the fear and apprehension that a young black man has when he is stopped or questioned. We have to get back to where the police are really an integral part of who we are as a community. And part of that is we have a lot of violence going on, and I understand that. We have a lot of young officers. And I can't imagine doing that job every day and being afraid for my life. But I can imagine that, as Alicia said, I am paid to protect and serve. I am trained for 9 months, whatever the case may be, to know how to do this job and to diffuse situations. And so my first level of diffusion should not be aggression.
Yes.
Whether that is the way I talk to citizens, the way I manhandle citizens, and I'm not saying all officers do, and definitely not the way I pull my weapons out on citizens. So we need to reform how immunity is determined when an officer may step out of line. We need to determine who is the right entity, who are the right entities to investigate our officers when there is something that looks amiss. And we need to get our officers back into our community, because you have a lot of unsolved crimes because nobody wants to talk to the police, because the police, in their view, and it's not necessarily true, but you come around only when something is bad. So let's come back around when something is good. I think there was a police athletic league event regardless of how people feel about face masks and the COVID protection with it, and however the case may be, that police athletic league used to be a place where kids could learn sports, learn sportsmanship, learn responsibility and discipline. And so let's get back to that as we reform. And then when you have an officer who has such as I can't remember his last name, Durrell in Ferguson. He had already had some challenges at a station. At a police force before. So somebody should have knew that when he got hired.
George Floyd.
Exactly.
He had,
But he had his in his own department.
Sure.
The young man who shot Michael Brown, that officer, he had challenges in a different
and came over to
that. So there needs to be, just like if I sell dope today and get caught, it don't matter where I move in America. You gonna know I sold dope and I'm a dope dealer.
Right.
So if that officer, we need a database to know who those bad actors are. And that'll only make it better for all of us as Americans, because we know who the bad actor is, so that we're not blaming the entire force.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if this is a part of the conversation with police reform, so let me know, but the training of officers with regard to high functioning autistic people who may be driving a vehicle. That person may be autistic, but they're high functioning. They can drive a vehicle. If you tell them to pull over, do this, do this, do this, that could discombobulate them, and they could tweak or do anything, and they could lose their lives. Is this a part of the conversation?
So that happened, a situation in Denver, I believe, was an autistic young man that was shot by the police. Look at him physically. He's a 6 foot something black man and should be able to follow instructions. He didn't have a sign on his back to say I have autism or some special need. But there was someone
in the car with him that told the officers that he was autistic.
So I'll take two stabs at what you just said. One was about how these issues are of conduct, whether they follow them or not. I believe law enforcement officers are professional officers, and we need to treat them as such, because I have a bar license that is subject to the Missouri Bar for character and fitness, and they evaluate me on a regular basis to some extent for me to be able to renew my license. Law enforcement also have to renew their license through post, but they don't enjoy the same level of critical review that attorneys do, but they have more authority than we do over individuals' lives. Now we have the public trust, but they have the show of command and use of force over individuals. And so I believe that we need to reevaluate even that certification process in Missouri, because you should not be able to go between departments in the same state where you got the certification from and they not know it and they just sweep it under the rug. So that's number one. We need to be able to address that in state first, and then we need to look at the federal level. How do we have a national database about people being able to transfer those licenses and that information come up? Because I can tell you right now, if you got felony warrant or a history of criminal activity of any kind, and they pull your information up in Regis, it's going to show up in neighboring jurisdictions as well. But we don't offer that same level of transparency and accountability to law enforcement officers.
Even if something as basic as if your license is suspended in Missouri, it's suspended in America. You can't jump over to Kansas and try to out-slick the game. So something that simple, if we can't do that, then we should not be able to be bad actors in a police department and just jump to another one once we lost the job here.
Absolutely. So the second thing you asked is about the training. The job of a police officer today is probably as complicated and probably 10 times harder, just as complicated as it is of being a school teacher, right? Because a school teacher is now the teacher, the counselor, the janitor, the
cafeteria lady,
everything. And you got 20 jobs and you get paid a little bit of nothing. New police officers are in the same boat. They got the responsibility of being the peace protector, the mediator, the show of force, the investigator, all that. And starting salary is less than $50,000 a year to put their life at risk. So I believe that we need to really clarify what the role of the police officer is. And so when people are talking about defunding police, they're not saying take money away and we don't want police anymore. They're saying police don't need to be responding to everything. We need to send in some situations we need them to show up as a show of force. In some situations we need to show up. We need someone to show up as a problem solver, case manager, social worker. and send them and not another police officer. But we don't have the ability currently to really differentiate those situations. They bring them in as supplements. But when they're training them now, the situational training they provide them has not kept with the complicated nature of what policing looks like today. And so it's very easy for us to Monday morning quarterback decisions that officers make. But I will tell you that they're making decisions because many of them aren't from the community they're serving. And they go into these situations with a heightened sense of, kind of self-awareness because they want to make it home. Like, yeah, I ain't paying me enough money to lose my life today.
And also by not serving in the communities that they are, they haven't had an opportunity to learn the communities, so they have to go off of what they've heard. I will say I want to give some kudos to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department because they have tried with the funding that they have to at least start having social workers. But you almost need a social worker in every car with the officers, and that's just, that can get definitely outside of a reasonable budget. But as to what Alicia is kind of saying, they can't be everything, and maybe 9 months isn't enough, but you got to have some extra training because even when we had more community policing, the job wasn't as hard, and the job is hard now. The world is different. For instance, you probably shouldn't be hiring police officers that don't know computers. You can't become a detective if you don't know how to investigate through the internet and social media, because the world has changed, and that's totally different for them. It's just another example of the different levels of complexities that it takes to be an officer and protect our communities. But I heard during last 6 months that an officer is trained that if they pull their gun out, it's shoot to kill.
Yeah.
Well, that part of the training, we got to change that mindset. That's not necessarily that officer's fault that he was trained that way, that if he brings that gun out, it's him or the other person. We've got to change the mindset so that they understand that you are really a part of our community. We're not this bubble and you're sitting outside. You come just to be this tough guy. You really have to be a part of our community to help us resolve things and help us respect you more and come back and respect us as well.
But that goes to speak to her point about how policing has changed. When officers were trained, when you pull that gun out, you shoot to kill. They weren't pulling out their gun on every call. Right. They weren't they weren't as quick to pull that gun out. They're not as quick to, at least some police officer responding in their neighborhood is not as quick to pull the gun out on Tommy, who's drunk on Friday night and is beating his wife. They know it's Tommy. They know he drunk. They know somebody got to go to jail, and nobody pulls a gun. But if it's Tyrone, it's on the east side of Kansas City, that's called for domestic disturbance. They're coming 3 cars deep, guns drawn, because all they know is there's some kind of physical altercation, and they don't want to assume the risk going in that environment because they don't know Tommy, they don't know his pattern, they don't know it's Friday and he just tripping because she didn't spend. Whatever the situation is, they're not familiar, and so they're going into it protecting themselves against the threat versus going in to diffuse a domestic situation. And so that is a difference of how they were initially trained, because the relationships assumed were intact. And with them not being intact, you're going to be a lot more heightened. And in that situation where they're drawing their guns more frequently, because there is a higher risk in certain communities, a threat to officers, and that's statistically proven, why are you still shooting to kill? Particularly in situations where the other individual doesn't have a gun.
That question is remained to be answered, and the departments and the officers be accountable for, and that's why the Black Lives Matter. But what I do want to, my last point, we got 3 minutes left, ladies. I want to put this out there and tell me what you think as lawmakers and politicians and in your position. If a person with autism is driving a car, a high functioning person with autism is driving a car, they get pulled over and they get discombobulated. Is there a way? Is it a conversation that these individuals, when their license plates are ran, the officer knows that they have autism?
I think that would be a state-to-state distinction, but I think that there are, and please forgive me because I definitely should know that. But there are, there are some there were some bills filed to start adding some things to your to your license, not your plate, but your actual driver's license when you run it in the state of Missouri, that would protect the autistic child. With COVID, we didn't move forward, and I don't think it came from someone that was actually popular either. So that is something that, from a state level, we can make a requirement, and we can also do that on our city and county ordinances. But it definitely is a state thing that we need to look further into, because we are adding more and more information in the computer system, so that you can know if you can. If
that
you
could
can
save somebody's life.
It could. I mean, if you can know if my license is suspended when I hand it to you, then it's just as easy to punch in, my license is, ABC 456. And with ABC 456, I have to wear my glasses. I have a heart condition. I'm autistic, or please beware. Those are all things that should be in a computer system that all police officers, have access to. Yeah, they all have access to, whether they're county, Kansas City police, city sheriffs, highway patrol, or whatever. They all have that same access.
Well, I'm pushing for that. I'm pushing for so much. We are literally out of time. I want to say that you have been tuned in to Kansas City's global community radio station, KUAW, Purpose, Passion, and Power with Jessica Lynn. I am excited, pumped, inspired, as I always am when I'm around these sisters of mine. Oh my gosh, this is all a mouthful, but I'm going to get it out. Sister Barbara Ann Washington, who is running for the Missouri Senate District 9. She is currently the House State Representative for District 23. And we have Miss Alicia Kennedy, who is a former prosecuting attorney. She is running for Lieutenant Governor. Listen, August 4th, you need to be there. At your voting poll, you need to vote. I am endorsing personally Barbara Ann Washington for Missouri Senate 9 and Alicia Kennedy for Lieutenant Governor. You need to vote. If you do not vote, you cannot complain. Let your voice be heard at the voting poll. You've been tuned in to Purpose, Passion, and Power with Jessica Lynn. Love you and be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.